Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar with Climate Convergence. What's next in the fight to stop the TMX pipeline? We're just going to give people a few minutes to log in and get ready, and to go out and support frontline workers too with pots and pans on the streets, which always takes a few minutes after 7. But thank you all for coming, and we'll be starting shortly. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Climate Convergence webinar, What's Next in the Fight to Stop the TMX Pipeline? My name is Allison Bodine. I'm an climate justice organizer with Climate Convergence here in Vancouver, Canada, and a social justice and anti-war activist. I am here tonight with a great panel of speakers from both sides of the US-Canada border for an event to discuss the possibility and how we are going to stop this TMX pipeline, and the possibility that construction is going to begin imminently. I want to acknowledge, first of all, that the event will take place and is taking place for those of us here in Vancouver and in the Lower Mainland on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam nations. Before we begin, we have an opening from Coast Salish Elder Kelly White, who has sent us a video of solidarity and support for today. So I'm going to go ahead and cue that up. And thank you everyone for joining us, and welcome to tonight's important discussion.
Txwməthkվəy in our Squamish language, our Salish language. Thankful and grateful. We're honored that you chose the path of environment, honor, healing our nations of united resistance to apathy. And we know that we're just part of the environment also. But we're also thankful that those that have chosen to work alongside for the safety and the rights of the environment life. Well, salutations, because all life needs support and not to be polluted, killed, ridiculed or belittled or demeaned in the meaning of life for the swimmers, the flyers, the ones that crawl, the four-legged, and us people have a lot of voice to help one another and help the other species too that are brother and sister Natsamat as one in the real life. So in the way of the eagle, we're thankful that you're out there to see for us, and the way of the owl to hear for us, and the way of the good graces of the goodwill of the Creator, that you're out there to make a good voice and a concerns meaningful, and for that it's life-saving. So xｗməthkվəy, hands are all up in the way of our people's millions of years. In total thanks, gratefulness, and honor for the work for climate convergence and better, safe human rights for all life, as we're one Natsamat, one brothers and sisters of this world. So xWməthkվəy.
Thank you to Coast Salish Elder Kelly White for that opening here today. Tonight, we're going to have an important and critical discussion. This month, the Energy Regulator here in Canada, formerly the National Energy Board, officially approved the drilling of a 3.6 kilometer long, 13-foot wide tunnel through Burnaby Mountain as part of the Trans Mountain Expansion TMX project. Their decision that this is somehow in the public interest is outrageous, but not surprising. Sonia Savage of Alberta recently said that now is a great time to be building a pipeline because you can't have protests of more than 15 people. Let's get it built. We in the climate justice movement on both sides of the border heard those words loud and clear. We connected with those that have been watching and surveilling all along the TMX pipeline route, and we see the evidence that construction is indeed beginning. Trans Mountain has refused to stop or even slow down the massive construction going on as part of the associated tank farm expansion on Burnaby Mountain during the COVID-19 pandemic, putting workers and the surrounding community directly at risk. But today we are here to discuss this unfolding situation and what we can do together in these challenging but decisive times. We would also like to start by saying that as climate justice organizers, we recognize that the fight against police brutality, racism, and environmental destruction are part of the same struggle against a system that puts profits over people. As climate justice organizers, we must stand in solidarity with the movement against police brutality and for Black lives. Tonight, we have a great panel of speakers that I will introduce one by one. I encourage people to keep up in the chat with your comments and questions, but please try and keep your comments in the chat box focused on the discussion that we are here for today. People can also ask questions to the panel using the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen. For anyone joining during Facebook Live, I also invite you to please post your question in comments below the videos, and we'll make sure that they're conveyed to the panel here. As we go throughout the evening, I have a few announcements of ways to get involved in events that will be posted in the chat, and I'll also mention them. And I encourage people to really join us in this important discussion about the way forward for the climate justice movement in the face of the TMX pipeline expansion. For our first speaker today, we have Lynn Perrin. Lynn is the director of Pipe Up Network in Southwestern British Columbia. She is a public policy analyst who has used her federal and provincial legislation to access information for 20 years. So we have with us a wealth of information to guide us in our struggle and to stand beside us. So please join Lynn Perrin.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to share some information with everyone on this webinar tonight. I'm a very privileged settler to be living on the unceded territory Coast Salish Stolo in the Stolo nations, Musqueam, Sumas, Kwantlen. And PIPE UP stands for Pro-Information, Pro-Environment United People Network. And our main focus from our beginning in 2012 was to stop the Trans Mountain expansion by becoming informed and sharing information with our communities. And also another goal is to act on reducing our CO2 in the globe. So, and we also, our commitment is to do it in respect and in collaboration with First Nations that we are allies with. And we actually have a formal agreement with Kwantlen First Nation in that regard. So we've been a pretty busy little group. I'm one of 5 directors, and we met in late 2011 and decided that we really had to stop the Trans Mountain expansion. And so we started to do public events, like we had town halls in the Fraser Valley, and we do a lot in the Fraser Valley. Sometimes we do join our allies in Vancouver and other places in Metro Vancouver, but we do a lot in the Fraser Valley as well. So we've had town halls in Chilliwack and Langley and Surrey and in Abbotsford over the years. We've joined with Raincoast and the Wilderness Committee and Forest Ethics and Sumas First Nation, hosting town halls. We've had rallies in the valley. We've had rallies at Fort Langley with Kwantlen. We've had rallies in Chilliwack with various Stalo nations, and most recently with Fridays for the Future and with Extinction Rebellion Fraser Valley. We've been delegates to our local governments talking about the expansion and why they should oppose the expansion, the many reasons why they should oppose it. We've tabled at a number of community events, and we've even been in local parades. We've had a few face-to-face meetings with the National Energy Board staff. And most recently, the thing that we've really been active on is hosting training. We've had 2 different kinds of training workshops. And first of all, we started doing decolonization training. And the reason we did that was because some people were saying, what's with this whole notion of unceded territory? And so we thought it was really, really important that we became very knowledgeable in what that means, what unceded means. And also that our supporters understand what unceded means as well, because, you know, we're allies of First Nations, and we really support their demands regarding their unceded territory, and that they be respected. And they've really been well received. The decolonization workshops, we've mostly had Sagage Ward, who is actually Mi'kmaq, but is married to a Stala woman who has done just incredible decolonization workshops. And then secondly, we decided that we should do some de-escalation workshops as well. And the reason being is that we found that people who don't agree with us regarding our opposition to the Trans Mountain expansion and regarding the whole our opposition to climate change are becoming more aggressive and more confrontative. And we've noticed that at local events when we do tabling at local events. So we think that we can't ask people to be going to rallies or taking part in nonviolent direct action without the proper training of how to handle people who want to push buttons and make trouble. So that's why we have the de-escalation training. And we've been very fortunate to have funding from Lush Cosmetics to do that training. Right from the beginning, we've been interveners in the National Energy Board hearings and really active interveners. And our big issues in those hearings have been on Indigenous rights with regard to their unceded territory, the risk of spill number 4 in Abbotsford, the permanent damage to watercourses, the risks to school children and human health, and the risk to agriculture, which is worth $2 billion in the Fraser Valley, over $2 billion, and it's worth over 11,000 jobs a year. So the pipeline, the current pipeline and the expansion does have negative impact on farming. So that's sort of what we have been doing. And what we're currently doing in this challenging time of not being able to be out on the street in any numbers, much to the joy of Ms. Savage, that doesn't mean we're not working on all kinds of strategies to stop this pipeline, and it's ongoing. And so we collaborate with a number of environmental NGOs and community groups. We do lots of research right now on, for instance, how much money the government is going to be actually spending on the expansion, not what they say they're going to be spending. We are looking into things that will most likely delay or could even stop the expansion. And we try and share this information with both the media and also members of parliament who are also in opposition to the Trans Mountain expansion. Up until the provincial health orders, we were going to weekly rallies put on here by students, Fridays for the Future. And I think the last one that we attended was number 53. They've been at it every single week here in Abbotsford for 53 weeks. So we really want to support them. We've also been doing some work with Extinction Rebellion Fraser Valley. So we've been doing events, whenever we can with them. And by the way, people in the community really appreciate us being there and sharing information. Like, they come up and they thank us. Thank you for doing this. So one of the things I like doing the best in all of it is actually being out into the community and talking to my neighbors. So we've also, we're also involved in the detailed route hearings. So they cannot start construction until the detailed route has been approved. So there are 7 segments, and segment 7 is like from the Surrey-Langley border to Burnaby. So that detailed route hearing has already been completed, and the decisions have been made on that. And that's why you see them working at the tank farm or talking about drilling. But there are about 4 segments that the detailed route has not been approved yet. So we are involved in segment 6. We're actually involved in that detailed route hearing. And so we're just preparing for that hearing and regrettably, it's going to be different because of COVID. Initially, it was going to be the only hearing that we could actually do cross-examinations of Trans Mountains experts, which would be a first in all of the hearings, but regrettably, that has not been able to proceed. So what that's about, like, you can talk about the route itself, you can talk about the method of construction, you can talk about the timing of construction. And now maybe you could show the picture of the creek and the fencing, the spawning deterrent. Yeah, so now this snow fencing was put into 5 salmon-bearing creeks up around the Blue River Valemont area, and they're doing it in preparation to do open cut trenching. And now maybe show the next one, Allison, please. Yeah, if you can expand that. So this is what they did to a little creek on Sumas Mountain. And this is something like they're going to do to 900 watercourses in BC. This kind of invasive, destructive, and so actually that's what we're opposing. We are strongly opposed to this kind of destruction of our watercourses, that a number of them are habitat for endangered Chinook and other salmon species that are, you know, at risk. So right now we're preparing 2 fish biologists reports that argue against this open cut trenching. Now, the spawning deterrents, when we found out about them online, we saw a picture of them online in their online Trans Mountain Today. We were able, we raised hell with the National Energy Board, and we were able actually able to get them to stop doing it, and we were actually able to get those removed. And we're hoping that they're not going to proceed with that on 26 more watercourses, which is what they want to do. And so that's one thing we're working on right now. And so it's more of a strategy that's more about, you know, pressing the regulator to not permit this. And also for putting some heat on the Department of Fisheries and Oceans about enforcing the new Fisheries Act. So that's one thing that we're really working on right now. And it's something that we've worked on, pardon me, for a long time. And so also another thing that's going on at the moment is that the conditions for the BC Environment Assessment, the BC conditions, the Squamish First Nation went to court and said they weren't properly consulted, and the court agreed with them. So now BC has got to go back and either add to or improve the 37 conditions they have on the project. And, you know, they're really important. And I'll give you an example of one that I just kind of pushed this week. They want to do some work on Sumas Mountain, and it's Sumas traditional territory. And they were wanting to start clearing the area, cutting trees and doing, you know, various things on the ground without consulting Sumas First Nation, without doing an archaeological field study. So we've actually insisted that a compliance officer from the BC Environmental Assessment Office go there and ensure that that condition is met, that there's consultation, and that there is an archaeological study of the area done. And Trans Mountain was trying to slide through and not do that. So it's gonna slow them down. And we've heard from the parliamentary budget officer that if it's slowed down for, let's say, a year, it's going to cost them hundreds of millions more to build. So that's one of the mechanisms we're using right now to stop it, is to delay it and increase the costs by delay, and also increase the costs by making sure that they do all comply with all of the conditions. There's 157 that the National Energy Board has said they have to do, and there are 37 that BC. And of course, right now we've seen by that horrible picture of that dig in the creek, they don't do what they promised to do. They tell the regulators that they're going to do this and that, and they end up doing something way more destructive. And so we're really trying to hold their feet to the fire, make them slow down, make them do things properly, and make them spend the money that they have to spend. And I guess that leads me to the final important thing that Pipe Up and our supporters and others are and can be doing, and that is to have eyes on the ground. Like, there have been a number of times that I've been called up by friends and neighbors and allies and said, hey, there's something going on in this park, I think it could be Kinder Morgan, it could be Trans Mountain, and in fact, we went down, and sure enough, they were chopping up the riparian area. They shouldn't have been doing it. And they got reported to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and they had to stop. So it's something that is really, really, really important right now. And if anyone wants to know, the details of where the route is in your neighborhood, in your area, the Wilderness Committee has a really, really good map that you can access and you can find out. And I guess in the future, another thing that we want to continue to do is our training, is our decolonization training and our de-escalation training. So that's what we have in mind for the future, as well as getting out there on the streets eventually. So that's about it from Pipe Up. Oh, what's on the screen right now is a document that I accessed through the Privacy Act from Trans Mountain. And it's my file, and they've been surveilling me. They've been tracking me on Facebook, in the local media, and on Twitter. They've been following me, and they're actually doing surveillance and sharing it with the RCMP. We heard that, was a couple of years ago now, I guess. So I'm delighted that my name is on this document, and I don't mind getting a bit of heat. And that's about it. And I hope some of your names will be on a document like that too.
Thank you, Lynn. You're right. It is in this day and age, it's not to be unexpected. The government of Canada has openly admitted the RCMP and Secret Service is being used to spy on environmental activists and Indigenous peoples. And I think it's something that's a reality we have to face. And with the introduction of Bill C-51 and C-59, we know that these may and will be used against us as we move forward. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for joining us here tonight and all of your knowledge. Up next, I wanted to just let people know what was coming for the next speakers. We have Wei Chen, who is here from SFU, Simon Fraser University, which is of course on Burnaby Mountain. We have Bill Moyer here from the Backbone Campaign in the United States, and Thomas Davies will be our final speaker, speaking from Climate Convergence. So next up, I want to introduce Wei Chen. He is an organizer with Justice No Pipeline, a subgroup of SFU 350. He has also been recently elected as the science representative of the Simon Fraser Student Society, which we send our congratulations to Wei Chen, and please welcome him to the floor, to the Zoom, I guess, as we say these days.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can. Okay,
cool. Hi everyone, my name is Wei Chen. I go by pronouns he, him, his. I'm a fourth year biology student at SFU. Also currently the science representative of the Simon Fraser Student Society. I just started my term in May. I'm also a member of SFU 350, and I'll just be kind of going through what organizing has been happening around TMX recently. Yeah, so I kind of started getting involved. I kind of met Thomas putting up posters and flyers for the September 27 climate strike. That's when I kind of got to connect with Thomas and Allison and Climate Convergence. And from there, we kind of started collaborating and working together on what we can do at SFU. And one of the very first organizing we did was we organized a rally and a teach-in at SFU. This was back in November. We had the teach-in in Convo Mall, and we had Climate Convergence had these light signs that were really great. We kind of marched down to the Gaudiya intersection, and we kind of displayed them out on the Simon Fraser University sign saying no TMX pipeline. And after that, Journeyperson was coming to SFU to visit the campus, and we thought this was a really good opportunity to kind of voice our concern as students, to let him know that we are still very concerned of this pipeline, and we want his voice in the government to make sure he knows that students here are still at risk, and we're still very opposed to the pipeline. We also attended rallies. Recently, the Indigenous Legal Challenges rally. And after that, a few of us in SFU 350 formed a group called Justice No Pipeline, kind of working group that's concentrated on organizing against TMX at SFU. You can follow our social media there. And after that, we worked on hosting a talk with Audrey Siegel, who's a Musqueam activist, Chris Bocock, the Burnaby Deputy Fire Chief, Mark Lalonde, SFU Chief Safety Officer. This was a really good talk. I think it was quite well attended. Christina Chan was there, the Burnaby Mayor was there, SFU faculty and some students were there. Yeah, so Audrey Siegel spoke about the violation of Indigenous rights and sovereignty around this project. Chris Bocock talked about the safety aspect of the tank farm that's on Burnaby Mountain, and Mark Lalonde spoke on SFU response to situations that will arise from the tank farm. There's a live video of it if you want to watch the whole talk. Can definitely link that. And we also been organizing some walkouts in solidarity with wətaʔڵ. We organized 2 walkouts for last semester, and one where we actually blocked off the Gaudiya intersection in solidarity with wətaʔڵ. And currently we're working with Dogwood SFU. I'm also trying to do as much as I can and as my position on the board of directors of the Simon Fraser Student Society. We have some, we have some plans going on. And in the past, SFSS has been an official intervener in the hearings before the pipeline was approved and bought. There's a lot of reports done around the tank farm, by Chris Bocock, by, SFU has, even have a safety report by PGL. There's a lot of studies done around tank farm and how dangerous it is to the campus and how, their safety measures are not at the industry's best. I think we need to continue to educate our student body and continue to have a unified student voice on this issue. And that has not been happening in the past, like it has not been consistent. And we will definitely do more as a student society this time around to make sure that our students know about the risk of tank farm, because I think a lot of students come into SFU not knowing the risk. I definitely didn't know about it coming into SFU until 2 or 3 years later, even though I come out on the bus every day and just passing the tank farm, not knowing what it is or not knowing the risk that's associated with it. So I think that the university and the student society could definitely do better in educating our members and making sure that the concerns is heard and making sure that we're bringing that concern into lobbying the federal government, making sure Trudeau is hearing our voices as students that we're very against this pipeline and how can he put thousands of students and thousands of residents of Burnaby Mountain at risk. A report came out quite a while ago saying, the response to the tank farm fire would take around 6 hours, which is kind of ridiculous thinking, people would just be stuck in a mountain and the only intersection of that mountain is located right above the tank farm. So it's just I would encourage anyone who's a student at SFU or just a student in general who want to get involved, please get in contact with me, or I would definitely love more people to be involved in this issue and making sure that everyone knows about it.
Thank you, Wei Chen. That's the end of your remarks, just checking. Awesome, thank you. I think it's been always an important point of organizing here in Vancouver against the Trans Mountain expansion to connect with students and faculty and people that live at Simon Fraser University and drive by the tank farm or the path of the pipeline almost every day and still don't know what's going on. So we look forward to our continued work and collaboration together here. Next up, I want to invite our guest from the other side of the border. Bill Moyer co-founded and directs something called the Backbone Campaign, which is based on Vashon Island in Washington State. Backbone is a creative movement building organization that innovates, designs, and guides others in the strategic use of artful activism tactics and creative organizing strategies. I think Backbone Campaign is probably something a lot of us have seen, but never known who was behind it. So it's great to have you with us here tonight, Bill Moyer, to share a bit about what you're doing and organizing against TMX expansion in the United States. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I want to just clarify that our organization hasn't been specifically organizing around this campaign, and that we were invited because of the scope of the kinds of tactics that have been utilizing and the kinds of work that we do. And especially in a time when it's very challenging to know what to do due to COVID-19 in particular. So I hope that's puts everything in a right light, and it doesn't. I don't want to claim to be doing things that we aren't actually doing. We have been involved in a number of campaigns over the years, of course. The one that people know most probably is Shell No, when we were opposing and organizing kayaktivists to oppose the Arctic drilling rig that was based in Seattle. So what I'm thinking is that I'd like to share some of the ideas, maybe of this, both the tactical ideas, but maybe some of the strategic concepts that we work from in our and have been influenced by. So I hope I'll share a screen, and I hope you'll forgive me if I'm not everything is perfect right now today, because we're working on some. I'm working on. Things are kind of crazy down here, actually. I don't know if it's been pretty intense, pretty great though.
Definitely. We appreciate your time. So don't worry about taking time to get the images up.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, share screen. Now, hopefully this one is the one that I want. Sometimes these sorts of things happen, and you get a PowerPoint that you weren't actually intending to show. So, you know, we approach movement building as our tactics as part of integrated as part of propelling a movement that is about building a world where nothing that's important is actually for sale. So we think of this as a battle of paradigms, and I'll try to speak briefly through that, some of those ideas. And so a lot of times we'll talk about this in terms of love, how love wins. A little background on Backbone campaign is that, yeah, we started trying to bring the Democrats in the US a backbone, and talking in 2004, talking about how all the issues that we care about are connected. I actually fell 60 feet out of a tree one time, hit the ground, and I couldn't breathe, and I was trying to get up, and my idea of getting up and my ability to do that was impeded by the brokenness of the backbone, the fact that I didn't have the capacity to manifest my vision, to manifest my aspirations. And for me, that's become a metaphor for social movement. So backbone is a metaphor for how everything's connected, but it's also a metaphor of how we're stronger together. And yeah. Also, I think it's important to remember that tactics serve strategies, strategies serve goals, and goals serve vision. So I hope you'll excuse me for speaking about this paradigm stuff when you're fighting a campaign, but I do feel that it's important to remember that that all these campaigns that we fight are for this vision of a world where you can't commodify everything and everybody. It's not all for sale, you know, or sold already, but that we have an alternative, that we're also building an alternative vision, something based maybe on the concept that we're all in this together, and that our obligation to each other, to future and past generations, that our journey in this short, precious life, and our relationship to the beautiful places that we live and sustain us, that those are sacred, those are beyond price. This is, I'm going to go, you'll see tactics thrown throughout this little presentation. This is a tactical light projection that we'll get to in a bit. That's on the US Supreme Court. I was very inspired by Coast Salish activists and leaders when we were at the Defend Our Coast rally in Victoria some years ago. When speaker after speaker echoed the theme that that even though it feels like a political battle all the time, that fundamentally it is a spiritual struggle, and it has to be fought most effectively fought from a place of love. So, you know, I'll keep coming around to this idea: love wins, protect what you love, etc. So I think that as we move forward, making sure that that we are expanding our alliances by appealing to what the best in people, and rather than the worst, which we see a lot of these days. So I'm informed by a thing called grand strategy. My mentor, teacher, Chuck Spinney, is a former Pentagon analyst, which seems a little strange probably, because I'm also a peace activist. But the three main aspects of growing that collective power is a thing that's been studied for a long time. Building social movement for us is really important, and to build power, we have to expand alliances. And I apologize because you all probably know so much of this already or know all of it. So I just want to give you a foundation for understanding me maybe better. We have to expand alliances. We have to increase the cohesion of our allies, and we have to deepen the resolve of our people. When we do those things, when we use our tactics and our campaigns and our efforts to do that, our messaging to do that, I believe that's inherently strategic. It's inherently power building. And I'll go into a little bit more about that. We also do the opposite to our opponents. We undermine their alliances. We decrease their cohesion. We weaken their resolve. We instill doubt in the paradigm that they live and are defending. And really, it's also important that we end conflicts without sowing the seeds for future conflict. In the same realm of grand strategy, there's concepts of domains of conflict. There are three domains of conflict, types of conflict. I'm using here a picture from the gates of Mordor, where the folks in the middle are kind of screwed, right? This is attrition warfare. We don't win. Mordor wins if we fight those who have the monopoly on money and violence with money or violence. We do get clever, though. We have moments where we use our tactical prowess sometimes, to find moments of surprise. So that's usually there's a little amount of secrecy involved in that. It's a little security culture and planning tactics where you want to make sure your opponent is not scared, but surprised, in awe, and that you're taking the space that's also very public space, because it's public space because fundamentally we're in a moral conflict where our enrollment of the society, the shifting of the vision of where we're going is about people seeing themselves in our work. Their aspirations and deepest aspirations and values are reflected. I think that a lot of
Sorry, people are just wondering if the slideshow is supposed to be advancing, because it's not for us.
Oh no. It's totally advancing for me.
Not for us. The view that we see, maybe try and redo it. The view that we saw was kind of the screen before you go into slideshow mode.
Oh no. Okay. That's so disappointing to me. I apologize for that.
All right, we'll try again.
All right, let me see if I can clarify my my instructions to my computer, so I'm not showing the right thing. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you for telling me. I'm feel a little silly that I missed that piece. Can we confirm this time that you are seeing, and I'm going to hit play on the slideshow?
Okay.
That's what's going on. Okay. I'm going to try sharing a different screen and see if we can make this happen this way. Can you tell me if you're seeing a slide?
Yes, I see a moral conflict slide currently.
My deep apologies to everyone for taking that time without you getting to be along on that journey. Okay. Please interrupt if there's anything else. I'm sorry. So I I don't know if I should go backwards. I think we should just keep rolling forward, right? We've got limited time here. But it's up to you.
Time at the end, we can review this, everything at the beginning.
I'll send it to everyone, of course.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so this is the concept. Are you seeing the grand strategy bullet points? Or
Yes, we've got that now.
thank you. Okay, this was the attrition warfare, maneuver conflict, moral conflict. Okay. So when we also think about, there's also a concept of grand tactics. And grand tactical idea is that you want your tactic to communicate, be an unassailable good. There's a thing called motherhood and mismatch, where your tactic reflects what is sacred to you and what is sacred to people, what is beyond what the things that they love, the places that they love, etc. Their deepest values and aspirations. Mismatch aspect is you attack when there's a mismatch between what someone claims to be real and what your public's experience is real. That's a vulnerability for them, and that's a place to target messaging and tactics. Or who they say they are and who they claim to be, the difference between who they actually are, who they claim to be, that's a weakness that we use our tactics to go after. And what they say they're doing and what they're actually doing, that's a mismatch. So those are vulnerabilities for our opponent. And if we allow ourselves to have those mismatches, those are vulnerabilities for us. The difference between what's real to people, the identity, and the activity that people are doing. So we want to expose mismatches in our opponents. This is kind of an irritating GIF file down there. Sorry about that. And like Obama was not rejecting, was calling himself the climate president, but he wasn't rejecting Keystone XL. We have this supposedly Christian nation that's deporting and locking up people and separating families. We appeal to, so the brave troops, foolish leaders, begin Operation Homecoming. That's just some messaging that's keeping the focus on the decision makers. That was around the Iraq War. And when we talk about like the TPP, when we were opposing that, it was not because it was just a bad deal, but because it was a betrayal. So we're bringing the messaging right to the heart of the matter, because people feel, you don't want people to have to think about your message. You want them to feel it in their gut and their heart. And we use these tactics to grow alliances. So do we. People have probably seen this, the spectrum of allies before, but we're trying to move folks who are passive allies, not engaged, to activate them. Those who are neutral to at least become passive allies or active, and our passive opponents to stop being opponents. We don't necessarily waste a great deal of time on our active opponents. All right. One last sort of theoretical piece around that we use is the idea of political calculus. Politics is the art of the possible, and mathematics is, calculus is the mathematics of changing variables. So if we just attack the policies, but we don't shift the culture, I think we can waste a lot of energy. I think we see in the far right, they try to shift culture before policy. I feel like we could learn from that. We could learn to, and I believe that actually the leadership of First Nations and our action has been to do that most effectively in every aspect of what I've spoken with so far, from the moral leadership to the protecting what you love, to the paradigm of the sacred, to shifting culture. So, protecting what you love. Now you'll notice here's another tactic. This is a banner that people are quite distant from each other. We're using deer fencing, a tie par wrap that is a house wrap material that we've painted orange. And this is one of the tactics you'll see in many themes, with themes and variations. I'm going to move through some of this other sort of art of war stuff. But one thing about I think at this moment we have the capacity, we might be thinking more and more about working in small squads. That gives us a lot of potential for variety and rapid mobilization. Anyway, I'm gonna not go into all that. Okay. So there is a famous organizer called Solinsky. He said, a good tactic is one that your people enjoy. So we try to keep things something that people can do and without it draining them, and that builds community and a sense of connectedness to each other and the issues that we're fighting for. This is light projection. You'll see in this picture, we have an inverter and a battery on a luggage cart. And that stage light has a little metal stencil in it that like I have in my hand, if you can see me in the corner someplace. And I'll show more of that as you look. So from that, we can project onto images, and it's completely legal from like the sidewalk to project light onto a building, at least in the US, and I've done it in Vancouver as well. People stop, take pictures of it, etc. But it's another thing that a small team can do. Because you're not touching anything, the police really, there's not much they can do. Some of the kind of things that we use as screens might be things like these tanks. These are in. All right. We've been doing some human murals. I don't know that this is how to do this exactly COVID safe, but we create a grid using string on the ground. And we've been doing this for the orca, southern resident orcas around the state using umbrellas. And we'll put a grid on a beach. And this is the kind of thing that we could send up to you all if it was, if there was a way to do it properly and safely. Using large props, banners with affinity groups, things at night, LED banners, inflatables. These travel very safe, they're very small, but just one or two people can mobilize them. And then I'll just go through some banner examples here for you that you've seen. So in some of these things, you can see that people are quite a bit distant. The kayaktivist, this might not work anymore, but there are other ways to do it to keep separation. So I have a feeling that we have a like inflatable pipeline. You can pull a banner behind a boat with a kite. There are lots of different ways to do this kind of work, and I hope that this is just a way to share some of those ideas. All right. I feel like I've taken a lot of time, so I'm gonna pause.
Thank you, Bill. I'm sure Thomas didn't intend to kick you off the screen so quickly, but that's okay. Hi. I feel like we've gone as far in climate convergence, at least as the LED signs, but I think there's a lot more directions we can go. So that's really great to see, and thank you for being with us here tonight.
My pleasure. I look forward to hearing that.
Yeah. Next up, I want to invite Thomas Davies. Thomas is a climate convergence organizer. He is a Journeyperson Pipefitter and author of System Change, Not Climate Change on Battle of Ideas Press, which came out in 2019. He is the final speaker before we go into our Q&A for tonight. So he has a big job. Go ahead, Thomas.
Can you hear me properly?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, good. Sorry for all the technical confusion. I'm going to blame the Canadian government for trying to interfere in our important webinar for my internet connection, but I think we're good to go now. Yeah, I really want to thank everybody who logged on tonight, and also everybody who's been the last few weeks specifically really standing up for oppressed people, standing up for Black lives, standing up against racism, standing up against police brutality, and everybody who's been standing up for over 10 years in this fight against the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. The reason I think this webinar is so important it's really important right now that we stay connected. I think I realized that most when we got the news about the federal approval of the 13-foot by 3.6 kilometer pipe tunnel they're planning on boring through Burnaby Mountain, which is a mountain that we've all been, like, we all live, work, and play around, those of us who live in Burnaby. And I felt a big sense of frustration, and I thought everyone else must be feeling that. And I think the reason is usually leading up to those kinds of decisions, we're aware of the timeline and we're organizing public actions to respond to them. So when the National Energy Board, every National Energy Board rubber stamp approval of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, we've usually had a protest in front of their office. We've usually been organizing with other people. And so we've been getting prepared and have been doing that with other people. And that's a really powerful thing. And I think that's really helped sustain the movement. But we weren't able to do that in the same way at this time. So coming together like this, I think, is especially important. But in those feelings, when we're in our own homes, feeling a bit isolated, I think it's a bit useful to go back to what the context is and realize what the bigger picture is. And I think we can gain a lot of strength from that. I want everybody to remember that pre-COVID, we had seen some of the largest coordinated international protests in history, led by young people. And the climate strike protests and movement was growing around the world. And in Vancouver, we saw the largest demonstration ever, and Vancouver's had some massive demonstrations on September, I think, 28th. And we were gearing up for the next climate strike rally. They were organizing meetings that were going on, and it was canceled because of COVID. There was meetings to organize the next coordinated big public action against the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. And that's been some very important focal points that we've had as a movement, is organizing these large public demonstrations. And that was something that there was already preparation meetings going on, and that had to be scrapped. And then I want everybody to think back to all the Wet'suwet'en solidarity actions that were happening, like, across this country, across North America, across the world, and how quickly they spread, and how energetic they were, how defiant they were, and how kind of steadfast they were, and can continue to be. And it was Indigenous led, but it garnered a lot of solidarity and support from non-Indigenous people standing up for Indigenous rights and standing up for climate justice, as the people in Wet'suwet'en Nation were standing up against the Coastal GasLink pipeline. And that power was something that was seen around the world, and I think we really felt. Of course, so there was that power that existed, and I don't think the people that were mobilized for those things have decided all of a sudden that they don't want to mobilize anymore, and those things aren't important to them. We've just been doing the responsible thing and limiting public actions that involve a lot of people. Also, we saw that there was the beginning of the tank farm construction on Burnaby Mountain, and there was some pipeline construction beginning on TMX in Alberta. Now, what I think the kind of initial burst of COVID-19, what it exposed and what it's shown to us, is the complete inability of the capitalist system to deal with the needs of people. One kind of example that I heard on the radio this morning was that 82% of deaths in care homes in Ontario happened at the for-profit homes. The more something is oriented towards profit, the less it is oriented towards human needs, and the worse it is for everybody, especially in times of crisis. And COVID-19 definitely exposed how little prepared and how unable they are to deal with the needs of people. But not only unable, but we saw this disgusting attempt to take advantage of the situation and make profits. While unemployment in Canada is the highest it has been ever recorded, 13.7% last month, which was higher than the last record in 1982. While 3 million people lost their jobs in March and April, and 2.5 million more had their hours slashed, we saw billionaires expand their profits massively. In the United States, by the beginning of May, the billionaires had gained, just in the few months during COVID-19, $605 billion. Jeff Bezos saw his wealth grow 34.5 billion US. And this while people were literally losing their lives, losing their houses, losing their livelihoods. I think we saw kind of, it was super highlighted how the disparities that exist in society and how important the changes that we're talking need to happen. And not only did they take advantage to make more money, but we saw the United States suspend environmental review and environmental regulations for energy projects. And we saw the Alberta government do the exact same thing. And then I'm not sure if people saw, but the Canadian government just suspended environmental reviews for offshore drilling on May 4th. So they're using this as an opportunity to get ahead and to give polluters an upper hand, whereas that's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. What we also saw was and I think it was really important for us, a fallout in the oil prices. And there was the tongue-of-cheek but serious article that the game a barrel of monkeys was worth a lot more than a barrel of oil, and we actually saw a barrel of oil be worth nothing. And we saw a lot of layoffs in Alberta, and that even came back to British Columbia. The Parkland refinery, which used to be the Chevron refinery in Burnaby, a lot of people that I used to work with, still work there. And they were in the middle of a huge shutdown when all of the coronavirus hit. And there was huge discussions and people were really afraid because in those shutdowns, there's just so many people working around the clock. And there's literally people working on top of people. And where you eat your lunches are these trailers just filled with other people. And there was so many outcries for the shutdown to stop or to find a different way to do it. But the company said they needed to go forward. And what they also did was they laid off people at that Parkland refinery for the first time in 10 or 15 years. And not only did they lay off workers, they tried to force the remaining workers to take a pay cut. My friend who's still welding at the refinery said that those who were getting laid off stood up and said, those who are remaining don't take the pay cut. The company Parkland, which made record profits last year, is trying to take advantage of the situation. So luckily, they were able to stand up for their rights. But in my discussions with them, people are a lot less confident in the oil industry as being like the be all end all. And the thing that I keep pointing out and has been, I think, well received is, a lot of people used to work in fisheries. A lot of people used to work in forestry. And when those corporations used up all the resources, they got rid of the workers and had absolutely no allegiance, no loyalty to the people that worked for them. And we're seeing the same thing. And so if these corporations have no loyalty to people who work for them, there's no reason that workers should have any loyalty to these corporations. And as the situation develops in Alberta and as the oil crisis unfolds, I think we have more opportunities for talking to oil and gas workers. And we in Climate Convergence responded to an open letter that was published in the Financial Post that was called an open letter to Canadians from oil and gas workers. And when you actually looked at the letter, it was actually written by literally drilling oil and gas CEOs. And they were calling for strange things like the government to buy their accounts receivable. They had nothing in there actually about how to protect workers. And they didn't even bother to try and talk to workers about what they were demanding or what they were asking. So we responded to that and just pointed out that we in the climate justice movement have much more in common with oil and gas workers than oil and gas workers will ever have with oil and gas CEOs. And that we see that these companies are continuing to push construction, even during times when it's obvious that these are putting the health of workers at jeopardy, and also putting huge health risks for the communities surrounding these construction projects. We've seen the work that the mountain protectors have done on Burnaby Mountain, demonstrating time and time again the lack of social distancing, the inability of social distancing on those construction projects. Yet, every level of government, and especially Trans Mountain, says either that's not our department or we're doing everything fine. So the other news that was referred to, besides the fact that the Burnaby Mountain Tank Farm and the drilling has been approved, is that the beginning of pipeline construction will happen in Kamloops. And then we've been hearing this news in the context of the police murder of Floyd George, and we've seen the movement that's been sparked in the United States and in Canada. And we've seen that people have gathered together and taken to the streets, even though we know the risks and we know that it's not ideal. But people are feeling like it's that important, and like their backs again are against the wall, and that the situation is that critical. So I wanted to give that context because it's easy to forget about what's going on in the world, and it's easy to forget the power of the movements that we're a part of and the possibilities of the movements that we're a part of when we're physically connected from people. But I think we need to understand that our job right now is to continue to expose the contradictions between what politicians say and what they do, especially with someone like Justin Trudeau, who says he stands for climate justice, who says he stands for Indigenous rights, who says he is anti-racist. And yet time and time again, in so many ways, he shows that that is a complete lie. And we need to continue to realize that the situation is dynamic. Nobody expected, I don't think, I didn't, that the wet'suwet'en and solidarity actions were going to be so widespread and so powerful and last for so long. And that what was going on and what is happening in the United States happened so quickly. We are living in dynamic times. And so we don't know, and we can't control when things are going to, what is going to provoke people to come together. But we know that it's possible. There's no way anybody anywhere can say that there's not possibilities for huge, important movements that can change things. Even though we're living in a very challenging time for that. And we need to keep on understanding that under the current capitalist economic system, they are unable and unwilling to deal with this crisis. And they're also trying to take advantage of it in really disgusting ways. So there's a lot going on. And I think it's fair to ask, why is the Trans Mountain Pipeline fight important in all of this? Why should we be focusing on this when there's everything else going on? And I think there's several reasons. And the first is really straightforward, is that we simply can't add the tar sands capacity and the CO2 emissions associated with that in any sort of sustainable modeling for the future of the planet. It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up to the Canadian government's pretty lackluster climate plan. and it would never add up to any of the real scientific analysis. There's no credible scientist that will tell you that the Trans Mountain Pipeline is a good idea and is sustainable for the environmental conditions that we're facing today. And I think what's most important, though, is that defeating the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion would be a victory for poor and oppressed people, for working people, and that it's been over a 10-year struggle. And I think it's really become symbolic of the fight for climate justice, for Indigenous rights, and even more broadly, a symbol of those who are trying to build a better and sustainable world, and those who are trying to squeeze every last drop of profits, regardless of human and planetary consequences, out of the old ways. So winning this struggle, I think, will put all poor, working, and oppressed people in a better position to fight back. So moving forward, I just think it's really important that we remember that there's always going to be bad news in this struggle. And if we gave up every time the government's own agencies rubber stamped approvals, the pipeline would be well on its way to completion. And then strategically, they're running out of moves as the taxpayer and the environmental costs continue to rise and become more blatant. We need to continue to emphasize the pro-pipeline contradictions, especially regarding jobs. More people are starting to feel the negative consequences of this. And people that I went to school with and did my apprenticeship with, who got jobs that they were sure were going to last them for life, are currently unemployed. And we need to start to begin more public and coordinated campaigns again on Trans Mountain, taking into account personal safety concerns, but working in creative and coordinated and consistent ways is more important now than ever, given the limitations we have for bringing people together for mass actions. So I'm not going to try and present a list of everything that I think is important to do, but I do know that we've been having more and more discussions with lots of different organizations, at least here in Burnaby and the Lower Mainland. And we're starting to work out ways to do these things. And if you have ideas, we're all ears, but we need to do it in coordinated ways, in creative ways and consistent ways to be able to actually break through and to demonstrate the real opposition and be an effective opposition like we know we are and can be. And most importantly, we need to keep fighting. And so it might not be perfect. It might not be the way that we're used to. It might not be the way that we would prefer to organize, but we have to find ways to organize. And we've seen that people in extremely challenging situations are finding ways to make changes and to challenge power. And so we need to take that into account and be part of that as well. So I'm just going to close up. Part of this whole situation has been being stuck at home more than when I would be out postering or handing out leaflets. So I've been reading a lot more books, and two books that I recommend reading. One is called Bobby Lee, Indian Rebel by Lee Maracle. And it's kind of the memoirs of growing up as an Indigenous woman in North Vancouver and getting involved in the movement for Indigenous rights in the 70s. And the foreword to that book, she writes about being at the Oka standoff in 1990 when Mohawk people stood up against the expansion of a golf course on their gravesite. Please look at this, but the Canadian government sent in the military. It was a huge standoff, but the golf course was not built. So she was there and she wrote kind of a reflection about that whole situation that was part of the foreword to that book. And I thought these words were very powerful. She wrote, "Creation is not passive. The birth, rebirth process of the earth, her storms, eruptions, tidal waves, floods, droughts, and the coming of periodic ice ages attest to the lack of passivity. The birth process of the plant and animal kingdom is not passive. Individually, every living thing on earth must labor to recreate itself. Seeds burst from shell to regenerate and process, and the process of birth for mammals is accomplished only with much bloodshed. The rebirth of any social order is not passive. We cannot live in the world the way it is. What is it when the mayor of a foreign town can come into your backyard and propose to play golf on the graves of your dead? What is it when that foreign country forms its own internal laws to make this despicable act legal? At no time in history have Europeans ever suggested playing golf on their own graves. Yet gravesite after gravesite of our dead are considered accessible for the most ridiculous of pastimes. The train of rape and defilement stops here. When we stand up and say enough, every single Canadian benefits. We/they are refusing to be obedient. From this day onward, we will listen to one instruction only: love our own. We have been busy over the past summer deciding who our own are. They are a range of colors: black, red, brown, yellow, and white. And we can recognize them by their loyalty to justice, peace, and solidarity. And finally, the Autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. And in his final speech, which was part of a campaign supporting sanitation workers in Memphis, he said, "Be concerned about your brother. You may not be on strike, but either we go up or we go down together. Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness." And so what we're advocating here is to continue on in that atmosphere, in that spirit of struggle, of dangerous unselfishness, and to be convinced that we can stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion and we can build a better world if we work together. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much to Thomas Davies from Climate Convergence, and to all of our speakers here tonight who are all still with us for a Q&A period. Again, we'll start addressing the questions and comments in the chat and make sure we get everyone's points. But first of all, I want to let everyone know about Thomas Davies' book. There we go. It's called System Change, Not Climate Change, Battle of Ideas Press. It came out in 2019. As we've been talking about, you could usually get it at a climate convergence table or at a rally, but for now, I'll direct you to the website www.battleofideaspress.com, and I'll post a link in the chat as well about how you can get your copy. I also wanted to encourage people to type more questions into the Q&A. We do have time and a panel of people with very interesting perspectives to share with us here tonight, but we do have a few to start. As people put the rest of their questions, or the panelists, if you'd like, you can preview the questions as well. I just have a few announcements that I wanted to make. The first of which is throughout the chat, people have posted links to different things, as well as to the websites of their organizations. I'll try and repost that all in an organized fashion, but if you'd like to copy the chat, everyone can do so in Zoom. So you can go ahead and do that, and it copy and paste, I believe, into a notepad, but I'll try and get everything organized for everybody. But I also wanted to let people know the next Climate Convergence meeting, where we can have more discussion about organizing against the TMX pipeline and environmental destruction, will be June 17th. So in 1 week, we've been having weekly meetings online for now on the Zoom platform, which everyone is welcome to attend. You can join our email list if you're not on it by going to climateconvergence604@gmail.com, or our website, www.climateconvergence.ca, which I'll post in the chat. I'm also going to be posting a save the date in the chat. On June 26th, so about 2 weeks from now, climate justice organizers and artists Marta Robertson-Smith and Pia Massey will once again be back in court. They have filed a constitutional appeal of their conviction of criminal contempt for their April 12th, 2018 art action blocking the gates of the Trans Mountain Tank Farm. over 240 people have been arrested so far in that campaign of nonviolent civil disobedience, which was aimed at stopping the construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. And Pia and Marta are having an online hearing, which means it's open to the public. And we are asking everyone to join in and pack the online courtroom. There's no link yet for how you can do that. It will, by following Climate Convergence, you can get the event information and a link, and there will be an event up on Facebook. So again, if anyone is joining us on Facebook Live, you can go ahead and type in your questions and they'll be sent over to us here at the webinar. Unless any of the speakers have a particular question they want to address, I'll just start at the top. Does anyone know what the economic justification for the pipeline is? What is the presumed market for this dirty and expensive fuel? Who would like to address this question? You'll have to unmute yourself if you're going to.
There.
Perfect.
Thanks. Hi, Betty. Originally, they said it was to export diluted bitumen to Asia, to China, Korea, India. But if you look even at their own evidence, they admit that there aren't any refineries who can refine it right at the moment. And they don't even know when a refinery could be built to do that. Supposedly it was going to be bringing more income per barrel if they exported it to anywhere other than the United States. But if you actually look at the export data, they're not even shipping hardly any of the current 330,000 gallons per day to Asia, to China. And, you know, so it makes you wonder why they're not doing that if they could get a higher price. In fact, most of the diluted bitumen is going to the Washington state refineries right now. So it's a mystery. It's actually a mystery of why they're actually doing this. There's no cost benefit analysis that shows us why they're doing this.
That is an excellent and true fact. Thomas, did you have something to add?
Shortly, I'll link to some Robin Allen articles about the financial justifications for Trans Mountain. About how the costs are going to be much higher than what they originally said they were, and all the kind of financial tricks they used to give Kinder Morgan a huge, great deal and break on the purchase of it, and then B, about kind of the lack of markets and how much what they're promising is completely false. But I'll link that because she does a better job than I could.
Another question. What is the best way to occupy a lot of space with small groups of people? For example, could we adapt banners and inflatables to meet the 2-meter social distance requirement?
I don't know if anybody else would like to speak to this, but I don't know if I would can say the best, and I think every situation is different. So understanding the space that you're in, you know, as you all have done incredible occupations up there. So, you know, I think that you already have a lot of knowledge about this sort of thing. If you're talking about taking up space in a way that is considered maybe trespassing, then you've probably seen like lockdowns and that sort of thing. Again, using your creativity to find the ways that you do that, that's really up to the situation. If you're talking about taking up space in ways that is like in public space, that's not an escalated situation where you're risking arrest, then I would say yes, of course, you can do that with large imagery. We use large imagery. I think, well, we took over the Puget Sound Energy lobby a few summers ago with that 40-foot pipeline. We just went in there and something like that, you can easily have people spaced in a safe way. And you can still have a speaker, drummer. I think there's plenty of room for that. Same with the other inflatables. I think those are great tools for taking up space. You can actually inflate them. You can roll them in with pre-inflated and then inflate them in the space potentially, because it doesn't take very long. Again, it's all about preparation. And if you have the element of surprise in situations where you could be actually trespassing, then you'd want that surprise. You want to make it so difficult for them to try to move you, or so embarrassing, or take that you have the time to establish and keep and hold the space. And then be documenting as you're doing it, so that even when they move you out, you didn't need very much time in the space to amplify your message. I think that you all have such a good cause, the absurdity of this project is so obvious to us, that when we see these negative futures, prices, whatever, oil prices, it makes it even more absurd. And also I want to just think again about, how nature does intervene. I think Thomas was making a point about that, and the idea that here in Pacific Northwest, when the mother orca Tahlequah did what she did for moving her calf, her deceased calf, for 17 days, 1,000 miles, she did what no activist could possibly do. I'd say that COVID-19 has kind of done what no activist could possibly do. The idea that we've been able to have less plane traffic, although they're trying to ramp it up, and of course they're subsidizing it being in the air anyway. But the sense of the inevitability of the status quo has been shattered. So whereas we see disaster capitalism, we also have a disaster something else, right? We can take in over that imaginative space. I'm just going to quote Diane DePrima, a poet who has a stanza in a poem called Rant that says, "The only war that matters is the war against the imagination." She says it 3 times. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. All others are subsumed by it or in it. So this idea that we have this, I think, a plasticity, if forgive that term, but for our imaginations right now, the absurdity of this pipeline and the desire for people to move into a different future is it bodes well for us in terms of this moment of bringing and mobilizing people, and people have time. Check.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add? Mostly these are things I hope we can talk about at our next climate convergence meetings, but also the discussions we need to have between climate convergence and the other grassroots organizations in the Lower Mainland to take what you've shown us, Bill, and figure out where to go from here. The next question I have was directed at Thomas, but I think everyone probably has some opinion about it too. Basically, what will it take to halt the pipeline and the destruction, local, regional, and global, that it is threatening? We're not going to elect a federal government that will stop the project, at least not in time. We won't win a legal decision to finally end it. We're not going to convince the capitalists to voluntarily give up profits. And just holding protests that are bearing witness or showing our displeasure haven't worked. We have to disrupt the project's construction and suffer escalating fines and imprisonment until the project is no longer viable financially or until we are able to replace capitalist destruction with a system based on democratic, social, and economic plumbing. Could you comment? So that's a big idea and warrants I'm sure a longer answer, but if people would like to share their initial thoughts.
I'll take a stab at it first. I don't think we know exactly what it's going to take to stop the project. If it was based on kind of I'm not sure what the word is, but this project should be dead. Kinder Morgan left the project, forced the government to sell it because they didn't think it was viable anymore. And the principal reason, I think, for why it became less and less viable was because of the concerted resistance and organizing against the project. The money the government spent on the project is astronomical and is going to be at a huge loss. And there was a quote about, I can't remember, another dead project. I think it was the Jumbo Ski Resort. And someone was saying, like, be careful, like, it looks dead, but these guys would try and breathe oxygen into a dead horse. And I think that's what they're really trying to do right now, is to, like, keeping this project going is so artificial and not economically or environmentally sustainable. So yeah, we have to change the political. And I think we have a lot of the elements that are necessary if we put them together to stop the project. But what combination and what the timeline is, I don't think anyone can say. But it needs to be a mass movement. It needs to be lots of people. And we've seen the beginnings of that with the largest demonstration in Vancouver's history that happened last year. It needs to be consistent. And it needs to be like in targeted and strategic areas. And we have that in Burnaby, where the tank farm is. And this pipeline has to go through so many different communities. And even just the thought of trying to go through Burnaby, which is one of the most densely populated urban areas in Canada, which is not saying as much because Canada is less densely populated, but there are huge possibilities. But we need to take this spirit of resistance, we need to take the mass character of it, and we need to keep organizing. And when it will stop, I don't know. But like, it's just a matter of putting pieces that already exist, I think, together.
One thing that could stop it is success at the Supreme Court of Canada for the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and the Coldwater, who are appealing the last approval. So that could really slow it down, and it could stop it. And I think that if enough of the tradespeople who this pipeline is supposed to employ, all of the tradespeople, if they were secure in a just transition, I think that would also make a really important shift into support for it. And of course, if there could be enough pressure put on government to stop the subsidies, because that's what's always breathing life into the industry. It's not only how much we're subsidizing the pipeline, like it's going to be close to 16 billion, but it's all the other subsidies to the industry, if they were stopped. But I think if the workers, if those who are employed by oil and gas right now had confidence that they could work in their trade in, you know, other alternative energy project. Yeah.
Wei, and I was, oh, sorry, go first, Bill. And
No, I was hoping that Wei would also.
Wei, I was just going to say, if you had any comments based on your experience at SFU. I mean, you started SFU, to many people, it would seem that there would be a high awareness about environmental destruction, about the pipeline, at least right in the backyard. But if the past year of organizing, if you've learned anything from that could be helpful going forward, and just what that's been for you and kind of the successes you think you've had.
Yeah, I think definitely in the past, you know, SFU and the Scientific Society has been, you know, voicing their concerns as well to the government. But it seems like there's not much awareness among the student body, just because, you know, new students come in all the time, students leave, and, you know, the school has not been active and letting students know the risk of the tank farm. You know, I think students have the right to know before they apply to this institution that there's a chance, you know, they'll be stuck on the mountain, and there's a chance that their life might be in danger. So I kind of find it still kind of ridiculous how a lot of students coming in don't know that and only finds out like a year or two later. So I think there's definitely need to be more educating and more awareness and more campaigns around on campus educating students. I definitely see success in that. Recently there has been a resurgence of activism and advocacy on campus, which has been missing for a few years now at SFU. You know, SFU was once known as the radical campus to other schools, right? But I think throughout this history, throughout a few years, it just lost that spirit, and I think it's slowly coming back with you know, seeing more protests happening, seeing more advocacy campaigns going on. People, you know, wetsuit and walkout was quite a few people were willing to actually go down to the intersection and actually block it off. So I think there's really a resurgence of that advocacy on campus. Yeah, I think there's definitely need to be more student voices in this movement, and especially from SFU being so close to the project. I think I will do as much as I can as my role in the student society to make sure that we continue to educate our members, we continue to be that voice for our student body, to tell the government that, you know, this needs to be stopped, not just for safety reasons, but for our future as well, as a youth who will be inheriting this planet, that this type of pipeline does not make sense, especially now in a pandemic where, you know, we're losing, people are actually in financial crisis, and a lot of things need to change systemically to come out of this crisis, making sure that no one gets left behind, make sure that everyone is taken care of, and billions of dollars are still being pumped in this project, and which is ridiculous. So yeah, I definitely think there's been successes in my organizing on this around this issue, but I definitely think students need to be more vocal about it.
It seems like the campus location is incredibly strategic and pivotal for you all. And it could be, have you done like a blast zone kind of idea on campus, or is there a pipeline route? Could you bring, like, could we loan you our inflatable pipeline? Have you paraded a pipeline through campus? Are there things like that might be of use in this project? And is the tank farm, it sounds like it's under construction. Does that mean that there are things that we could project upon there? Just wondering.
Yeah, like if displaying like a pipeline would be like really good as well, like displaying like the blast range of like if there's a fire going on, that'll be really visual and I think really capture the attention of people, or even just you know, an action like just blocking out the intersection to show that this is what's going to happen when there's a fire. You literally cannot get off the mountain and you just be stuck. I think that's a very good way to show students, yeah, if there's any artist out there that has anything that we can use, that'll be really great.
Yeah, well, you can borrow our gear for sure. The other thing that comes to mind is that, and when I met Reuben George some years ago, and he was emphasizing for us down here that the tanker traffic is going to be a huge threat to the Salish Sea. And so again, you know, connecting it to the things that people love, like the orca and the salmon. So I think that the disaster and the fear stuff works a bit, right? I don't think it's something we have to do. And I think that the reminding people of what they care about most deeply and what they want for their future and their children's future is also valuable. And in kind of in relationship to that, I wonder, one thing that's been useful for us, and I'm wearing a Railroad Workers United cap right now, because we've been learning a lot and building very interesting relationships with rural communities and environmental justice groups, alliances around the country, and railroad workers and et cetera, because we wanted to have a positive program. So we did a book and a project called Solutionary Rail, and just the process of having these conversations, like, what is the alternative? Now, it seems like right now we have a lot of people's attention. They're able to imagine a different future. Are we articulating the future that we want? It's one thing to be opposed to things, but unless we can couple that with proposition, so opposition with proposition, critique with proposal, even when we're critiquing because of what we love, right? That's not a negative thing to critique or to oppose things. But there is also, I think, value in articulating and pulling time and energy and people's mind space away and towards the vision we want instead. I'm going to stop talking.
Can I just add something about Simon Fraser University, or first ask something? Does anyone know how far it is from the tank farm to the campus? Okay.
I don't know the exact distance, but it's walkable, you know.
In 2012, there was a spill at the Sumas tank farm, and it was a small spill, and it went on for 6 hours before people's noses noticed it. It wasn't their technical equipment that should have picked it up, and in fact, there were 3 alarms at the Edmonton control center that they ignored, but it was people who lived a distance away in an urban neighborhood that woke up smelling it, and some of them got nauseous. Some the school air intake, there's an elementary school that the emissions went into this whole neighborhood and the school, and you don't need a fire like that. Those emissions are really toxic, very, very, very toxic. So I have no idea if the students or how many people who live up there even realize that risk. People should know.
Yeah, exactly. Like all those things, like students should know before they even come to the school, before they even apply to the school. But there has not been those kind of work from the university. In terms of like the distance, I think we walked down from Convo Mall to where kind of above the tank farm is. The intersection was around 15-20 minutes walk, I think. So around that distance. So it's pretty close, really close.
Yeah, someone's just posted it's around 500 meters to the first building, but it's true the flammable forest is all around. And the modeling of what would happen is really the entire area of the mountain and further, almost creating like a firewall even that would go into Vancouver. And I think kind of what this discussion has raised for me is the importance of consistency. Also that, people have done that work in the neighborhood on Burnaby Mountain. For SFU, there were events throughout the year. And now we're in a different situation, but we have to figure out how to keep doing this work and turn it into something that really people know and understand what's going on and what the danger is. And when they bring that big drill to start a big hole in the mountain, if it gets that far, then I think people will see it clearer. We have to have a good idea of how we're going to respond, as one person brought up in the chat. I just have one final quick question, and then I'm going to ask all the speakers to wrap up too, if you want to think of your closing comments. But the final question was just from someone that missed the beginning and wasn't sure if anyone spoke about the worker to community risk of COVID-19. And I think the reason I wanted to ask this was just so we could be sure to address really the basic reality that where this pipeline project is being built as it travels through rural British Columbia, or if we're talking about Wet'suwet'en and the Coastal GasLink pipeline, it's something that the risk of COVID-19, the workers bringing that to the communities impacts Indigenous communities the most, poor rural communities that have little to no access to hospitals. So if someone could address that issue and really the importance and the ties to health in those rural and Indigenous communities by a project like the TMX expansion.
Well, the whole matter of, you can call them worker accommodation or man camps. It was even addressed in the report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, that man camps are a threat to their lives and their safety. And so there's that. And then of course, we've seen one of the mines near Fort McMurray, the workers from there came to, I think it was the Okanagan, the Caribou, and they brought COVID with them. And the worst one was Laloche, Saskatchewan, where they also, traveled to. And Laloche was hit really hard. It's an Indigenous community, and it was hit hard with COVID. And that was directly from a tar sands mine and camp in Alberta.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, so I'll go ahead and ask all the speakers if they have any final words. As you gather your thoughts, I'll just re-announce that I think what's next in the struggle to end the TMX pipeline, we don't know exactly. We've brainstormed a lot of ideas tonight. I think we've got some new information and also some new fire to work with as we build our struggle here. But what is important is that we are recognizing the critical need right now to especially connect more, to unite more, and to have consistent actions that are accessible to people, both people that are choosing to stay home and continue staying home, and those that feel comfortable going out and doing safe and distanced protests. That we are not going to let the government of Alberta or the government of British Columbia or the federal government use the COVID-19 health crisis as a way to push through these environmentally destructive projects, such as the TMX pipeline expansion. So Lynn, we'll just go in the order, I guess, of how we presented. So Lynn, do you have any final words?
Well, I would say, you know, while we can't be out on the streets, it's a really good opportunity to become more informed, you know, and also as far as strategic planning, I mean, this technology that we're using right now, you know, is great for, you know, getting together and doing some strategic planning, because one method is not going to stop this pipeline. It's going to take a lot of different ones, and it's going to take a lot of creative ones as well. What's interesting about what Savage said was that we've been one step ahead of them, and we got to stay one step ahead of them, you know? And I think how we do that is to be imaginative and creative.
And Wei Chen?
Yeah, I think like what everyone has said, that we need to be strategic and we need to kind of coordinate our actions, knowing that, you know, SFU is a very strategic place in this fight. I'm really open to working with anyone who has any ideas or who wants to work on something together. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'll post our link to our Facebook page and you can message that page. But yeah, other than that, thanks everyone for coming and listening.
Thank you. Bill, from south of the border.
Yeah, my mom's actually a resident alien down here. So I have a lot of family up there. And we share a beautiful, you know, region, right? And I know it's unceded land, and we have a lot of reckoning to do with that past. And we owe it to the past and future generations to protect this beautiful place. So there are a lot of ideas that come up for me. Someone said, you know, we have to stay ahead of, I'm sorry, Lynn, you said we have to stay ahead of the opponent. And that is actually also a grand strategic idea. There's something called the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, act, a decision-making cycle. And the kind of advantage we have with this sort of guerrilla form of battle we're going to engage in is that as long as we're harmonized by shared values and shared vision, I think it's a perfect time to pick those people who are your pod or your bubble or your squad where you are safe with each other, to up your tactical game, to do beautiful things together. Low risk, high visibility. I encourage as much of that as possible, and Backbone Campaign would be happy to support, help think through any of that, and lend our gear or whatever. So if we harmonize our many nodes to work in concert with each other, we can create an environment where the opponent can't actually react to everything that's going on. So it's just instead of just having one march, to have actions, multiple actions that are happening and constantly happening, and culture jamming and happening in the streets and in the places of decision making, etc. Contrasting the mismatches that we've talked about. That's a very powerful moment, and this is a great time for people to get skills. People have the time to do it, and I hope you'll check out some of the links that I've shared. Happy to share more. If you can explore backbonecampaign.org. Maybe there are ideas there. You can always get in touch with me. I'm Bill at backbonecampaign.org. Anyway, whatever we can do to be of use. Thank you. It's been a real honor to be part of this conversation. Check.
Thank you, Bill. All right, Thomas.
Yeah, again, I just wanted to thank everybody. I think we're often fighting against this idea of inevitability, and that things are the way that they are, and the way things are organized and the priorities that we live under are the way, because that's the natural evolution of human beings, and this is the best that we can do. I think a lot of people are taking a long, hard look and really asking, is this really the best we can do? And answering that it isn't. And that means that people's minds are open to more possibilities. And I agree, we need to talk about building this better world. And we can make some really simple arguments right off the bat. Like, how about the G7 countries don't subsidize oil more than 100 billion? How about Canada doesn't spend billions buying a tar sands pipeline expansion program? Instead uses that money to train people who already are highly skilled at their jobs for other jobs. Nobody who's ever worked in an oil refinery or a chemical plant or an LNG plant where you wear these little monitors that if it buzzes, everybody has to run into a room that has positive air pressure because you're gonna die if you breathe the air, where you're constantly wearing these supplied air breathing apparatus things and you feel like Darth Vader. Like, nobody who works in those places thinks that they are safe or they are great places or good places to work. They work there because they think that's where their livelihood is. But people are questioning that more and more. And if we're putting the responsibility on the government and to demand they reprioritize the finances, I think it can really show a contradiction, because they could have done things totally differently. And in a better world that we're talking about, they can and they will. So the kind of more concrete thing I wanted to say is that, like, the way that I thought about the climate strike in September with a couple 100,000 people was how amazing it was, and that, like, we have numbers to make decisive moves. Like, even if 1,000 of those people showed up every week at Burnaby Mountain, think how different that struggle could and would be. And think about if we do things in a coordinated way every week, how different this struggle can be. Every day sometimes when we need to. There's possibilities. We can stop this pipeline. And I think there's a really clear understanding that we're not just fighting against the pipeline, that we really are fighting for our futures. And that's something that the young people who have mobilized around the world have put on the agenda. So I feel like fighting for my future. I feel like fighting for everybody else's future. And I think that this fight against the pipeline and for a better world is really important right now. And we live in very important and decisive times and in a really important and decisive place. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Thomas. I know everyone shares this, and probably everyone listening shares the same idea as well. Tonight's forum on what's next in the struggle to end the TMX pipeline is just another beginning that we have towards building a more united and stronger climate justice movement on both sides of the border. I think we've seen the power of consistent action with the folks in the United States that are fighting on the streets every day against police brutality and for Black Lives Matter. And we know that it is the same struggle and same fight that we're building here and will continue to build against the TMX pipeline expansion and climate destruction. So from Climate Convergence, thank you to all who attended tonight. Thank you for your time and also for your continued work and collaboration together. We've been honored to have with us the speakers. I'll just say your names again, and then we'll go ahead and sign out and encourage people to get involved with Climate Convergence and all the organizations represented here tonight. And let's continue our work together. Thank you to Lynn Perrin, the director of Pipe Up Network in Southwestern British Columbia. Thank you to Wei Chen, organizer with Justice No Pipeline, a subgroup of SFU 350. Bill Moyer, who co-founded and directs the Backbone campaign based on Vashon Island in Washington State, and Thomas Davies, Climate Convergence organizer. Good night to all.
Thank you. Night.
Thank you, everybody, for all your organizing, Allison for coordinating, and thank you for facilitating.